Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be with you today and to welcome President Pendarovsky from North Macedonia. President, you are living in Europe, in a country of Europe, and of course your country has to live with the consequences of a conflict in Europe. So we would be very glad to listen to your perception of what's happening.
Thank you. I suppose that we are hearing each other. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure. I'm coming for the second time to the Paris Peace Forum. For the first time being here during the first forum. And it is a great chance to see each other and to exchange the views on the most pressing issues of the world today. And of course, coming from a small country from the Balkan region, I certainly wouldn't like to address the most pressing global issues, but the most pressing issues and touching upon the region I'm coming from. Now, everybody is speaking in the past several months of the Ukrainian crisis and the fallout of that crisis. And I mean, illegal aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And speaking about the interruption of many vital chains in the world for supply of the food, of the energy, and of course, speaking about the disaster where the main subjects are the Ukrainian people and the great devastation going on in that country. But I can tell you that this is only the top of the agenda for the Western Balkan people and nations, because since the early 1990s we are in a kind of a crisis, permanent or revolving crisis of different types and nature. First of all, we haven't, speaking about all 6 Western Balkan countries, we haven't completed the transition from communism to capitalism. Some unresolved outstanding issues from the fall of Yugoslavia are still with us, speaking about the Dayton, Bosnia, north of Kosovo, and so on and so forth. So this is only a topic of the agenda and simply accelerating or worsening all the conditions being previously on the ground. So our people are unfortunately getting accustomed to crises of different types. But as we have spoken before the session started, you asked me to speak about the solutions. To be as short as possible, the solution for the systemic crisis still going on in the Western Balkan is to have more Europe and more of the Western alliance in the region. The state of affairs is not to be praised too much about in the region. We have been, honestly speaking, forgotten by the European integration project in the past decade, I would say, not only North Macedonia, but the rest of the Western Balkan region. No one is progressing towards Europe. No one. In the last decade, Serbia and Montenegro are negotiating. No breakthrough in this regard. Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina are simply forgotten countries. No one is speaking about them. I am speaking and referring to the Brussels agenda. And North Macedonia and Albania have been blocked by different reasons in the past years. And finally, we have saw the green light in this summer when we have started negotiations along with the Republic of Albania, of course, and we are now in the middle of that so-called screening process, which should start we should go on for about 14 months and should end by end of November next year. And after that, of course, we will enter the discussions about concrete chapters previously, clusters previously, the chapters of the European integration process. So that's going to be, everybody knows, it's going to be a very difficult and lengthy process with a lot of challenges along the way. And we will need much more of the presence of the European Union and of the countries which are organized, which are not only long-standing members of that organization, but have a long experience in building democracy and having organized societies. One of the negative consequences of being for so long outside of the mainstream of European integration is that the region is emptying. The youngest, the brightest, the most dynamic forces are leaving the region, definitely not looking back. On paper, we have, as a Western Balkan region, 18 million countries. In essence, we have 40 million maximum. And that these trends are simply, it seems to us today, as of present, as we are speaking, irreversible. So more Europe will mean that young people will have better chances to prosper in their countries and not to look throughout the world to prosper, to have a career, and to have the better standard, higher standard of living. So please, urging everybody coming from the old established European democracies to look into the Western Balkan with much more attention, not to look into the region or to the region only when the big migration crisis is going on. For example, that was the case in 2015-16 with the Syrian refugees, or when the Ukrainian war is going on. Just be more permanent in this approach towards the region.
When you say more Europe, a more visible and active European presence, is it more specifically in terms of economic action or politics?
I can tell you that you're putting forward a dilemma which is not fully understood by people in Brussels and by many people living in the region. Why is that? We do not need only the common European market, not only economic integration. We do need democratic values as well. Whenever some initiative being strictly in the economic domain, being developed in the European Union, or being proposed by the European Union member countries, like the latest one, European Political Community, everybody is speaking whether that's going to be only the debate club, we are going to speak about something, or it's something, it will bring to us something tangible, something visible to our people, or speaking about the European economic area. We would like to be there, but we would like to be the part of the political institutions of the European Union as well. Political institutions. So we do need to speak about democracy. We do need to speak about human rights and freedoms. We do need to speak about independent judiciary. We do need to speak about the freedom of the media. So see, almost all of these mentioned by my side has nothing to do with looking into the dividends, into the profits and chasing the profits, speaking about money, material resources. We do need that, a higher standard of living. But believe me, much more than that, we do need an organized societies, services being delivered on an equal basis to all the citizens, regardless of their background. And of course, we do need free societies and liberties for each member of that society.
President, you mentioned the candidature of your country to the European Union. You know, in France, you very often hear the criticism. This is not enough to have a process of joining the EU, and joining the EU should not be the only possible policy for the EU. There should be other ways to help or to engage with other countries in Europe. In that respect, you mentioned the European political community. How would you see those various levels? You know, what can be done independently from the Brussels processes? What can be done in the framework of the accession process? And what about this new body, the European political community?
You know, the very moment that community was announced, I spoke with a few key players in Brussels, including Mr. Charles Michel, asked him directly and expecting the direct response, open response, as between friends. If this is envisaged by your side, I mean by the whole of the European Union, as a kind of a waiting room for the would-be members, or kind of an alternative to the permanent membership in the European Union, I would say no, thank you. We do not need additional debate club in order only to debate and to speak about European values and about the project of United Europe at peace. We do need something tangible. I've been told by many of my interlocutors in Brussels that it's going to be only an instrument who will help the main process, integration into the European Union. In such a case, we are willing to participate. But please do not offer us something which might be interpreted by the people in the region as a kind of a waiting room or kind of a preparatory club for the permanent membership, for the membership within the European Union. Because we have been waiting for so long to start negotiations, exactly 17 years, speaking about North Macedonia. And if you are offering us something plus, and if you say in essence, or behind the scene, or beneath the surface, that you're going to negotiate for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, so believe me, support for the European Union will wane, And I can tell you that the latest polling being done in all of the 6 countries in the region of the Western Balkans, not only in my country of North Macedonia, are disastrous. Then polling is showing that in the past 18 months, speaking particularly for my country, in the past 18 months, year and a half, the support for EU membership in my country dropped down by 25%. With these initiatives, if they are really an alternative being offered to the people living in the region, then these percentages are going to be down and down permanently.
You were at the meeting in Prague, where this community has been launched. Do you think that it has been useful in terms of identifying precisely the subjects on which this new body could be useful without making more complicated or making slower the process of accession? Or is it just a beginning?
To be honest, the first meeting, the first gathering of that European political community in Prague was a bit encouraging to us.
Encouraging.
Encouraging. Beyond doubt, I should be honest and openly say that we have not been dissatisfied with what was going on, with what went on that summit. So, but the main topic in Prague, because of the current circumstances and the current context provoked by the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, was the pan-European energy policies. And we have spent a lot of the time in Prague speaking about that subject. And that's a good subject to start with, speaking about the pan-European solidarity and showing a real interest about the region. European Union has not been quite good in managing the COVID crisis regarding the countries in the region. I'm speaking about the distribution of the vaccines. I know that, first of all, the member countries of the Union should be satisfied with that distribution of vaccines. But to wait for months and months, I'm speaking about the countries which are either in the process of negotiating or are candidate countries for membership. It was for so long that many people down there in the region said we are completely forgotten as a countries, as a people, as a citizens of tomorrow's Europe. And it seems to me that this energy crisis being provoked, as I said, by the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the European Union has learned the lesson. Is now much quicker in helping us in approaching the region and very concretely speaking about the concrete resources to better manage and cope with the energy crisis, which has hit the region probably the most when you compare the other regions within the European Union.
Very interesting. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question in the room? Oui, monsieur. Maybe you could come.
My name is Dmitro Naumenko.
I'm not hearing.
Okay. Dmitro Naumenko, Ukrainian. You can still. Okay. Not good. Okay, Dmitro Naumenko, Ukrainian Center for European Policy from Kiev. We're a think tank dealing with the European integration issues of Ukraine. And Mr. President, I would like to ask you such a question on whether Ukrainian integration, our country will enter the accession track sooner or later after fulfilling the post-candidacy requirements of the European Commission. Do you think would we be considered as a one block of the acceding countries, and how do you think will we influence each other on our accession track? So because Ukraine is quite a specific case now for EU accession, so it would be interesting to hear your thoughts.
My position on the application of Ukraine have been expressed by my personal letter I sent to President Zelensky many months ago, when before that decision happened by the European Union, by the European Commission, suggesting we should help each other in a positive way, and we should impact each other in a positive way. But to be honest, because of the very specific case you have mentioned by yourself in Ukraine, this was for the time being only a political message of support and message of political symbolism from Europe to Ukraine. So everybody knows that right now, Ukraine is not still ready to negotiate concretely with the European Union. But in my view, that decision by the European Union, speaking about Moldova as well, and putting forward 2 countries from the Western region directly into the pipeline of negotiation, that was for the very long time, when you're looking back, showing the strategic view or outlook of the European Union. As I said, no one's expect today or tomorrow Ukrainians to start negotiations or screening process. We are now in. But that shows a clear solidarity and readiness on part of Brussels to tell to the Ukrainian people, we are counting on you as future formal Europeans. So that was a great, great move on the part of the European Union, which for years, in essence, was dealing with a petty bureaucratic decision. I have to say that. I'm sorry to say that. This was a strategic decision, strategic vision, and I would to encourage all leaders within the European Union right now to continue along that path.
Thank you very much, President, for this very interesting conversation. Now we're I'm very pleased to welcome the Prime Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Albin Kurti. Mr. Prime Minister, the same question as for the previous speaker. Your country has to live with the direct consequences of the war. It has also an aspiration to be part of the European family. What is your perception seen from your country?
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure and honor to participate and address to the audience of Paris Peace Forum. Let me start by giving a brief presentation and then after to engage into an open discussion. Today we carry a Bleu de France as symbol of memory and solidarity with victims of First World War. 108 years ago, Europe was overrun by war which brought so much death and destruction across Europe. In the span of 30 years, our continent then was engulfed twice in brutal wars, where the total number of civilians who died exceeded the number of soldiers who perished, including a Holocaust that shocked humanity. We easily forget, but Holocaust took place at a time when authoritarian regimes, aggressive and chauvinist nationalism, and their propaganda were on the rise and when human reason failed. So we should go back to human reason. 78 years after the last World War and 23 years after the last war in Europe, which was in Kosovo, in my country, we have now a war again in Europe. Again, we are failing in human reason. And this time it is Russian aggression against Ukraine, which represents also an attack on democracy and freedom and security in our continent and beyond. The drive is the same, to push borders further in quest for supremacy and hegemony over neighbors. The idea of Europe after Schuman Declaration was that when we talk about borders, we talk only how to liberalize them so that our citizens move freely, our economies integrate and our opportunities expand. This revolutionary idea created the European Union we know today, which has brought peace and prosperity for hundreds of millions of Europeans. European Union must be defended. We cannot let the progress we have achieved so far be destroyed by narrow-minded people who measure their success not on what they can build, but on what they can destroy. The truth is that peace and security in Europe is not being challenged only in the east by Russia, but also in the southeast by Serbia. They don't share a border, but they share common goals for domination. They see states through the lenses of religion and ethnicity, as they don't believe in democratic states where citizenship is based on adherence to lawful institutions and the embracement of values of freedom, equality, and individual rights. This is fundamental, and we must be vigilant. We cannot allow fascism to gain legitimacy again, because our continent was many times lit on fire because of such ideas. What we see today in Ukraine, for me, is very clear. It's Russian fascism. Fascism is not reserved for Germany or Italy between two world wars, or for, let's say, Chile's Pinochet regime half a century ago. Fascism can fall as a plague upon every nation or state, and we have to be vigilant. If our grandmothers and grandfathers lived in the time of German and Italian fascism, our generation is living in the time of Russian fascism. We have to defend democracy, we have to defend republics, and defending democracy means defending human rights and political pluralism. The Republic of Kosovo is a democratic state. We believe that every citizen, despite race, gender, or ethnicity, is equal under law. We have the most advanced constitution with comprehensive rights for minorities, especially for Serb minority, rights which are not matched even by the most advanced democracies in the European Union. Last month, the World Justice Project again ranked Kosovo first in the Western Balkans on the Rule of Law Index, and second in the entire world for greatest improvement in rule of law over the past year. Again, we have improved for 17 places, both in fight against corruption, according to Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, and in the World Press Freedom Index, their Reporters Without Borders report. We joined EU sanctions against Russia and gave living and working conditions to Ukrainian journalists to fight for freedom. 11 of them now are residents of our capital, Pristina. The Republic of Kosovo is doing well also regarding economy. 10.7% last year growth, and this year's forecast around 4% after you subtract the inflation. This growth was distributed and redistributed. We made public education free of charge at all levels, including university. We have introduced monthly allowances for new mothers and for children. We have increased pensions by 11% and for disabled people by 33%. We have subsidized our farmers more than ever before since we declared independence. And at the same time, we have increased by 50 euros monthly salaries for all those who are employed in public sector, whereas we subsidize private sector with 50% of salary increase for their employees. At the same time, we are saving energy and rewarding those who save energy. Whoever shows that has been saving energy in comparison to the same month last year, we also subsidize them in a double fashion. So if this October you have managed to save, let's say 100 kilowatt hours in comparison to the October 2021, we subsidize you with payment for 200 kilowatt hours. and this is bearing also results in my country. The way forward is that we need lasting peace in Western Balkans by making Western Balkans more democratic and more European. There is a tendency within the European Union to think of the European Union as Europe. Such thinking, although not incorrect, is incomplete without the Western Balkan countries. So, Western Balkans is in Europe, but European Union should become Europe, and that goes precisely via inclusion of Western Balkans into EU. For Europe to become sovereign and autonomous, it must first become whole. I understand that EU needs internal reforms, but internal reforms should go hand in hand with external enlargement. Enlargement is the essence of EU, and EU should stay faithful to its essence. 14 years after Kosovo declared independence, we still have 5 countries in the EU who do not recognize us. As much as we understand their concerns, they must also understand that by acting so, they are empowering those who see conflict. Kosovo has started normalizations of relations with Serbia in 2011. 11 years after, nowadays, in many ways, relations are no better than a decade ago, and there is a reason for that. Serbia has failed to democratize, and it still seeks conflict rather than cooperation. It still glorifies war criminals instead of judging and sentencing them. I'm afraid that Serbia today is neither democratic nor independent. It is a regime that is guided by Orthodox Church and dominated by Putin's Russia. Kosovo wants peaceful and good neighborly relations with Serbia, and we are ready to extend our hand to a country that has committed genocide against our people if they are ready to unclench their fists. What we don't offer is further concessions designed to divide our society and country in ethnic and religious lines. But if Serbia is not ready to recognize us, as they repeat every day, the 5 EU members don't have to wait. They can help Serbia recognize Kosovo faster if they recognize first. I am mindful of their fears, but the highest court in the world, International Court of Justice, declared that Kosovo's declaration of independence didn't violate international law. Therefore, legal debate on legitimacy of declaration of independence is basically over. Everyone in Europe has a responsibility to contribute to strengthening of peace and security in Europe, and I want to thank EU for all the help that they have been giving to us and that they are giving to us, and in particular France for its contribution for peace, democracy, and development in the region in general and in Kosovo in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First question, to which extent the current war is having an impact on the day-to-day life of your fellow citizens? What are the many challenges, the major challenges that have been created by the war for your country? And second question, the EU has made an attempt to mediate between Serbia and Kosovo. What's your assessment of this mediation?
In Kosovo, we have inflation, which is around 12%. And in spite of this, we forecast around 4% of GDP as economic growth this year when you subtract the inflation. So we are managing to come out successfully so far from the crisis, which is a direct consequence of Russian invasion and military aggression in Ukraine, because energy prices went up and then all sorts of other prices went up as well. Kosovo has a big chunk of its goods being imported, and in this way we also import the inflation. We have had two big financial packages for our citizens. Last year we started with economic recovery package, which was around 4% of GDP. And this year we continued with economic recovery package, but we added another package to reduce the impact of inflation. And altogether, this year is 5% of our GDP. We have the support of people, and people understand that these consequences are not due to Kosovo as such, but due to this unprovoked, unjustified aggression of Russian Federation. And the other grave impact is that unfortunately Serbia did not align with European Union, United States, United Kingdom in its stance towards the Russian Federation. On the contrary, Serbia is continuing to be a regional hegemon in the Balkans, but also a client regime of Moscow. Around the border of Kosovo, in Serbia, in the so-called ground safety zone, which is 5 kilometers wide, since NATO intervention in 1999 to stop genocide against Albanian people, there are 48 forward operation bases of Serbia, with 50 to 150 soldiers. 28 of them are gendarmeria, and 20 of them are military. So this is a great danger for our country, and we are very vigilant, but never afraid. Kosovo is not in NATO, but Kosovo has NATO inside. And the history of Kosovo and history of NATO are intertwined. But also our future are intertwined. Therefore, we want to join Partnership for Peace program, and as soon as possible to join NATO. So once we get recognition by Spain, Slovakia, Greece, Romania, immediately we are going to use this to join NATO in a fast track. Because up to now, I have been allocating 1.5% of GDP as annual state budget, and we want to reach the 2% criteria. On the other hand, the European Union is trying hard to mediate between Kosovo and Serbia. We need to normalize relations. Kosovo is a normal country, but I must admit that relations of our country with Serbia are not normal. We need to normalize relations, and the dialogue in Brussels is the dialogue for the status of relations, not for status of Kosovo. It's a dialogue for the status of relations with Serbia, and this normalization implies a legally binding final agreement with mutual recognition as its centerpiece. I'm not saying that in the agreement with Serbia we're not going to have many other things, but centerpiece must be mutual recognition. With me as Prime Minister, dialogue with Serbia is principled, is symmetric, is equal, and I'm being very committed, constructive, and creative throughout the process. On the other hand, I believe that Serbia has to distance itself from both Milosevic in the past and Putin at present, because this could help us a great deal in achieving the agreement, doing justice to the victims, and reaching reconciliation for the future generations.
Prime Minister, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I've been said by the managers that we have to leave the room, but it was a very useful conversation. Thank you very much for being as candid and as precise as you have been.
Thank you very much for having me. Merci beaucoup.